Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. So for the exegesis, I'm going to start again with the website. So this is the website that hosts my thesis project, which is called the Pazzi Conspiracy, an educational video game. And this is where all of the components of the thesis submission are. So this is where the game is held. There's a teaching guide attached to this, and there's a blog as well that talks about the development process. So breaking down the website, there's the description of the game, and on the right-hand side, there are a lot of screenshots so people can sort of see what the game looks like before they start playing it. While I was still developing the game, I needed people to test it for me. So I have a section on how to be a beta tester, which is still open and available if people want to give feedback. Of course, I have a link to citations. And then the most important part is down here at the bottom where you can download the game itself to play on your computer, as well as the teaching guide. And then there's some instructions on how to download it in case anyone gets stuck, because it can be a little bit tricky, especially for Mac users. And then down here at the bottom, for those who are interested, is the development log where I talk about how I made certain parts of the game in a lot more detail. So I'm going to stop sharing this and go ahead and open the game and share my desktop. Okay. Okay, great. Actually, do you have the audio on your end?
Yes, I hear the audio.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Yeah, it's all together.
So I'm going to talk about the game in terms of some interesting design points, and then I'm going to talk about each level in conjunction with the teaching guide rather than going through the whole game, because I realized if we went through the whole game, it would be very slow. So just starting with this menu, I wanted to keep it really easy and simplistic for people, so you can always come back to this menu after you finish a level and select the next one, and you'll always be reminded of your controls in case you get stuck or forget. So before we get into it, let me go down here on the teaching guide. The very first thing that instructors will encounter when they download this is an overview of the way the game was designed to be used in the classroom, but it offers a lot of flexibility so that professors can adapt it for their specific needs. And then there are some sections about how the art and the sound teaches through immersion. So let me open the game and get into that. So let me turn the audio down a little bit. So I won't go through the whole game as far as the story goes, but just pointing out a few things design-wise. Most of the game is all about its story, so I wanted to make sure that the dialogue box, which is where if you interact with a character, they're going to talk to you and you're going to read a lot of text, and that's sort of what the whole gameplay is. So I wanted to make sure that this section was very readable. So it has sort of an easier to read font that still has kind of an older style to it. It's a little bit bigger, so it's easier to read. And then you'll always see who is speaking right next to it, so that students who might struggle keeping track of all the different characters and the very difficult Italian names for American students will always have this as a reference. And if I skip forward ahead a little bit, another character, Lorenzo, is going to come to the scene. There he is, okay. And then you can see what it looks like when you're speaking to a character, and then their portrait is here and their dialogue is here. Other important things is this section up here at the top of the screen. This is called the heads up display. And basically what it is the tool belt for all of the players. It's all of the items that people will need to navigate the world of the game. So you have a map of Florence here, where you can jump around different parts of the city, which you need in the first level to complete a quest where you're finding different people throughout Florence. You have this button up here so that you always can have a reference to remember what you're supposed to be doing and your objective as the player. And then if you ever want to get out of a level, all you have to do is go back to the main menu. and it'll take you right back here. Okay, so let me, and unfortunately there's no save feature yet because that is complicated to implement. So if you go back to the main menu, you have to start over. But you only have to start over for one level, so it's not so time consuming. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about just briefly the goals with level 1. Here they are. Great. So this introductory level is just really meant to break down students' expectations and assumptions about the Renaissance, because the game as a whole is sort of meant more at the introductory level for high school students and lower level college students. So it introduces students to key characters like the Medici family and key places throughout Florence using the map. And if I click ahead really fast and get to the end of this dialogue, I can show you how to use the map to get around Florence. So what's happening here is Lorenzo's just sending you on a quest to deliver a letter and to find his brother. But if we go to the map, now we can go throughout the city of Florence, and it will literally take us to these different locations. So this is inside the Duomo, and we've got some people inside that you can interact with and talk to. So if you click on them, or if you hover over them, they'll glow, so you know you can click on them, and then there will be dialogue that you can interact with. So this is the case for lots of different places, but maybe the Duomo is the most interesting, and then the Palazzo della Signoria. So there's lots of people here, people gather. So for level 1, you're sort of going around the city of Florence and getting to know just what Renaissance Florence looks like. And with the teaching guide, I have some general objectives I want students to get out of it, a summary of the most important thing that they should take away, some suggested readings, but I don't point to any specific chapter. Well, I point to a specific chapter, but not a specific excerpt. And there's a lot of room for professors to change things if they want students to read more or less. And ideally, students would come to class having played the game and done the readings so that they can have a discussion all together and talk about what they've learned. And I have some discussion questions to sort of steer them more towards the learning objectives for each level. So that's sort of the important stuff for level 1. Level 2 is about patronage of art. So of course, wealthy people during the Renaissance were commissioning a lot of paintings. And I wanted to talk about this one here, which is The Procession of the Magi by Benozzo Gozzoli, because it's very important for the image building of the Medici family. And the Medici family is sort of the main subject of this game. So if I can skip ahead, well, actually it would probably take a while to skip ahead, but basically sort of the content of this level is that Lorenzo, which doesn't happen in history, but it's an excuse for us to sort of examine the painting. He spills a candle on it and damages it lightly and calls the artist back to come and fix it. So you're tasked with going to find the artist, and then he has you examine the painting while he's sort of making an assessment of the damage to figure out who throughout this painting is part of the Medici family. So in the last part of this level, you get to interact with and click on the painting, and it'll give you a description of all of the interesting figures in it, or some of the interesting figures in it. There's a lot of interesting figures in it. So as far as the learning objectives go, it talks about how art is used for image building of the wealthy elite, but also sort of the relationship between patrons and their artists. And then at the end of level 2, in addition to level 1 and level 3 and level 4, there is always going to be a small objective, learning objective about the Pazzi Conspiracy, since that's the subject of the whole game. So you learn about one person who's involved in their motivations. So you get to learn about that very slowly throughout the game, since it is very, very complicated. And then let me take us to level 3. I tinkered a lot and struggled a lot with level 3 because level 3 is all about humanism, and I've read a lot of the same texts as humanists, but it's not really my thing. So I messed around with this a lot to sort of, the goal was to get sort of an overview of different things that humanists might be studying. So at first, this was supposed to be a symposium where everyone gives a speech on a virtue, and that would require me to make a lot of speeches, probably too many speeches, and I would lose my audience and myself. So instead, this is a little bit more inspired now by the book here, and everyone suggests a game to play, and how you're involved is you get to pick the game to play, but then at the end they don't actually play the game. So it is a little bit easier to write and easier for students to follow, I think, because it introduces some ideas that the elites and intellectuals at this time might have been talking about, and I think it showcases leisure time during the Renaissance for elites a little bit better, which I think is good. And then at the end of this level as well, there is one of the conspirators who you get to know a little bit. So moving on to level 4. So what's happening in level 4 is that Lorenzo de Medici is hosting basically like a dinner party, and a lot of the conspirators are invited, which is very funny looking back historically, and that is something that did happen in the Pazzi Conspiracy, where they tried to kill the Medici there and failed. So this level is all about how people at the elite level are interacting with one another, and how they're sort of making allies or enemies, or sort of making friends almost, but there's sort of an obligation there. And sort of the key point is that who you know is super important in the Renaissance, because it can get you a really good marriage, really good church positions, things like that. And then people can definitely stand in the way of your ambitions, which is why all of the conspirators dislike the Medici in one way or another. So you attend the dinner party, you eavesdrop a lot on the conspiracy, and you learn a ton about the conspiracy. So the very last level is on April 26, 1478, when the conspiracy itself takes place. Excuse me. And the goal of this level is basically just to summarize the key events of the conspiracy itself. So players are learning about the Pazzi conspiracy, its lead up, and a little bit of its fallout. But sort of the way that the player gets to interact with it is they get to try to stop it. But and they can choose several different paths to do so. But ultimately, because in history, Giuliano de' Medici really did die, in the game he also has to die. But you can try really hard to stop it, and you can get pretty close, and you can sort of think you stopped it, and then you didn't actually stop it. And then by the end, you'll sort of know, after playing the whole game, sort of who the individuals in the conspiracy were and why they were involved, and how they were part of this larger network of Renaissance elites. So I think that is all of the key points. I might just say something about the art really quickly. So because this game is heavily rooted in research, but it doesn't make an argument of research, or it doesn't make a historical argument rather, all of my primary sources for the most part are the paintings and the music. So the music is, because I don't know very much about Renaissance sheet music, I found someone online who did and recorded a lot of guitar covers of Renaissance sheet music and posted them free for people to use, which is great. So that's where most of the music in the game comes from. And then all of the art is Renaissance art, but some of it I had to Photoshop in various ways because we have real portraits of some of these people. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. Okay, so we have real portraits of people like Giuliano de' Medici, but with portraits we don't have bodies, and in video games people need to be like full people. So for a lot of the real people in the game, I photoshopped heads of existing portraits and I put them on different bodies. And it's I guess, I don't know, everyone who's looked at it has said it hasn't been obvious, but
Not at
I'm
all.
the one who photoshopped it. So yeah, I look at this and I'm like, oh, this is very funny to look at, but I think overall it's a good effect. So and then a lot of people don't have surviving portraits, so I really just took people straight out of Renaissance paintings and put them in the game as stand-ins, and then all the backgrounds are Renaissance art as well, just sort of a blurred background. So I think that's all for the main points. Let me X out of this and stop share.